My aunt said, "It's embarrassing to call her." But in the middle of the meeting, it was the CEO who said, "Is she here? That's who I told you about. My name is Emily, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the one they preferred to keep in the background. Not because I caused problems, not because I embarrassed them with some scandal, but because, in my aunt's words, I just didn't match the aesthetic. Too plain, too quiet, too visibly from the side of the family they pretended didn't exist. She once told my cousin, loud enough for me to hear, that I ruined the symmetry of every family photo. I was 12. I remember because I'd worn my best dress that day, a faded yellow one that used to be her daughter's, now a size too tight and a decade too late. Family gatherings were always delicate negotiations. Invitations never came directly. Sometimes they were lost, other times overlooked. But whenever I found out through an old Facebook post or a late comment, I still showed up, always with something in hand, a homemade pie, a thrifted gift. Part of me believed that if I kept showing up, kept proving I cared, one day I'd be seen. One day I'd be allowed to take up space without apology. But that day never came. Not when I graduated with honors. Not when I got the scholarship that no one asked about. Not even when my name appeared in a byline. I'd walk into those rooms and feel the atmosphere shift, eyes sliding past me like I was a server who wandered too close to the table. My cousin once joked, "Emily smells like bus seats." Everyone laughed. So did I quietly. So I wouldn't cry. You learn, early on, how to shrink without disappearing. How to become wallpaper in places where your silence is more welcome than your presence. Maybe you felt that too, sitting at a table where the bread gets passed around you, where your job isn't mentioned, your name barely registered. I made it a game. How long could I stay before someone actually looked me in the eye? It hurt more than I ever admitted, because as much as they ignored me, they were still family. My father's sister, my cousins, the people who should have offered a hand, not turn their backs when things got tight. But I wasn't their family. I was their secret, the part they didn't post about, the relative they described vaguely as from the other side. Once, after a barbecue, I offered to help clear the table. My aunt looked at me annoyed. "Just don't touch the glasses. You'll drop something again." Her daughter was next to her, holding the very same glass I had chipped 2 years before, like that one mistake had written my resume for life. All my small kindnesses forgotten, but the chip in a wine glass? Immortal. Eventually, I stopped trying to be chosen. I stopped waiting. I built something of my own in silence. Took the jobs no one wanted. Studied after shifts. Watched lectures on cracked screens. Coded until my eyes burned. Not because anyone told me I could, but because somewhere deep down I had to prove it wasn't them who defined what I could become. And I wasn't doing it for revenge. I wasn't doing it to make them eat their words. I just wanted to become someone I could live with, someone I could respect, even when no one else clapped. That tiny voice inside me, the one they tried to hush, kept whispering, "One day, someone will see." And for the first time, I started believing it. Then came the night that changed everything. A formal family gathering, big and over the top, held in a rented venue that reeked of ambition and catered confidence. I wasn't invited. Of course not. But I saw a post, someone tagging the event, not realizing I'd see it. I knew exactly who would be there. Everyone, including someone my aunt had been obsessing over for months. A CEO, a woman with influence and presence, someone my aunt desperately wanted to impress. The day before the event, I stopped by my cousin's house to drop something off. The door was slightly open. I heard my aunt's voice inside, sharp and fast. "No, don't send that to Emily. We're not inviting her. God, no. She doesn't belong in a place like that. It'd just be embarrassing." Then laughter. Then silence. I froze. My hand tightened around the paper bag I was holding. Something inside cracked, but something else settled. I walked away without saying a word. heart racing, fingers trembling, because that was the moment I decided. I'm going. Not to prove anything, not to reclaim a seat they never offered, but because I finally understood something. I deserve to be in any room I walk into. I'm not their shame to hide, and they were about to find out exactly who I had become. Maybe you felt it too, that tension in your chest when you walk into a place you weren't invited to, but know deep down you deserve to be in. That was me, standing at the entrance of a ballroom I was never meant to enter. Not according to them, at least. I wasn't on the guest list. I knew that. They made sure of it. But there's something they never understood. Silence doesn't mean absence. While they were busy curating appearances, I was building. Quietly, patiently. That night wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about no longer hiding from myself. I wore a simple black dress. Nothing dramatic. But it fit me well, and it was mine. Not borrowed, not passed down. Bought with my own money. Earned through hours no one witnessed. My shoes echoed on the marble floor, and as I stepped into the light of that gold-drenched room, I could feel it, the shift, the discomfort, the tightening of backs, the low whispers, because no one had warned them I might show up. My aunt caught sight of me mid-sentence. Her expression cracked, just for a second, before she rearranged it into something that passed for a smile. My cousin leaned toward a friend, whispering something behind his napkin. I walked past them all with my chin level and my pace steady, not out of pride, but out of resolve. I found an empty seat near the edge of a long banquet table and sat down. No one welcomed me. No one stopped me. And that was fine. I wasn't there to be welcomed. I was there to take up the space I'd been told for years wasn't mine. I let my eyes scan the room slowly, pausing at the center table. There she was, the CEO, the woman whose words I had studied, whose journey I'd followed in articles and conference videos. A woman who didn't come from privilege either. A woman who built. I wondered if she could feel how much I needed this moment, not for validation, but for alignment, for everything to finally make sense. They had no idea how close I was to her world, how my work, quietly launched and relentlessly improved, had already started crossing her orbit. It was my secret, my edge, and I held it close like flint, ready to strike. Dinner was served. Glasses clinked. Laughter floated. My aunt stood to speak, her words dripping with curated sincerity about legacy and family values. I watched her perform from a distance, and for the first time I felt nothing. Not anger, not longing, just distance. Like watching a stage play from the back row, knowing the script by heart, and no longer needing the ending to change. Then the moment came. The CEO rose from her chair with the kind of presence that quiets a room without needing to raise her voice. She began with pleasantries, gratitude, compliments, then a shift, small but sharp. Her tone lowered. Her eyes scanned. She started speaking about innovation. About projects with unexpected origins, about work that changes systems, not just products. And I felt it. Every word she spoke was familiar. Every example mirrored the features I had poured myself into. My heart picked up speed. My mind raced through every line of code, every late night, every discarded version. It was mine. She was talking about my work. My aunt leaned forward, clearly intrigued, completely unaware. My cousin paused mid-bite, and then the CEO stopped. She looked around the room, then directly at me. "She's here, isn't she?" Her voice was soft but carried. The young woman who built that platform. Emily, right? My breath caught. So did the rooms. My cousin dropped his wine glass. Red spread like blood across white linen. The crash barely registered. "She's the one I've been talking about," the CEO said with quiet conviction. And in that instant, all the versions of me they tried to erase, shy Emily, invisible Emily, not good enough Emily, faded. The only one left standing was the one they couldn't deny. I didn't stand. I didn't cry. I simply looked up, met her eyes, and nodded. And for the first time, the room had to listen. You never expect your name to echo through a room that once did everything to forget you. Not like that. Not from her voice. Not in front of the same people who once sighed when I showed up at the wrong time in the wrong shoes. But there it was. Emily. It wasn't loud, but it stopped the night. I froze, fork suspended midair. My aunt's expression faltered, her features stiffening like glass about to crack. My cousin looked across the table at me, like seeing something he wasn't prepared to recognize. For a second, it felt like no one breathed. The CEO's voice continued, even and certain. She's here, isn't she? The one behind the system we've been talking about. The platform that's already shifting how we think about local access and logistics. It's hers, Emily's. There was no performance in her tone, just truth. And truth, in a room built on polish and illusion, has a way of making people uncomfortable. Their bodies didn't move, but their silence screamed. She smiled slightly. She doesn't even realize how brilliant she is. That's what struck me first. The precision, the purpose, the humility. This work, it's going to redefine the conversation we've all been having about equity and infrastructure. And she built it from the ground up. The weight of her words wasn't in their volume, it was in their certainty. In the way they cut through the fog of pretense that had hung over that family for years. My aunt looked down. My cousin blinked fast, jaw tight. And I didn't move. Because what do you do when the world stops pretending you're invisible? You breathe, slowly, deeply, and you stay exactly where you are. What struck me, then, wasn't the awe in the room, it was the discomfort. They weren't proud. They were exposed. The narrative had slipped from their fingers. The girl they didn't invite was now the focal point of the night. Not because she forced her way in, but because the truth had grown too loud to ignore. I felt her eyes on me again. The CEO, steady, present, and without a word I gave her a nod. A quiet thank you. A recognition between builders, between women who knew what it meant to make something out of nothing. No applause followed. No cheers. Just a long, shifting silence where every person in that room recalculated what they thought they knew about me. And maybe that was the loudest justice of all. I sat back in my chair, my shoulders still, my gaze forward. Internally I was shaking, but I didn't let it show. I had waited too long for this. They needed to see me exactly as I was, unbothered, unmoved, undeniable. Someone at another table leaned in and whispered, "That's her? That's Emily." And I realized I had never been invisible. They just never looked. Not until someone powerful said I was worth seeing. But now that I was seen, I wasn't going anywhere. Success, people think, begins with a spotlight, a door swinging open, a hand reaching out. But for me, it started with a second-hand laptop that overheated every 30 minutes, a kitchen chair that wobbled if I leaned too far back, and the kind of silence that wraps around your ribs like wire. No one ever asked where I went after family dinners. While they lingered over dessert and stories that never included me, I was walking home in the dark, heels clicking against cracked sidewalks, head full of what-ifs. I'd climbed the stairs to a shared apartment where the windows didn't seal, the lights flickered when it rained, and the heat hissed like it resented being there. That's where I worked. That's where I began. My desk was a chipped table in the corner, next to a humming fridge. I used earbuds to drown out the neighbors and dimmed the screen to preserve battery. I wasn't studying in a university library or working from a co-working space. I was building from the margins. And every line of code I wrote came with the ache of not knowing if it would matter. I didn't have mentors. I had YouTube, tutorials, and online forums. I didn't have funding. I had $5 coffees that bought me a seat at cafes with free Wi-Fi. I couldn't afford a second monitor, so I toggled between windows like I was defusing a bomb. I took free courses on a cracked phone while riding buses and folding laundry. I skipped meals to pay for web hosting. The idea was born from a conversation I wasn't meant to overhear. A woman at a market telling someone she had to throw away half her produce that week. Later that same day, a man in line at a bodega complained that fresh food was too expensive downtown. That disconnect, it stayed with me, grew in me, until I couldn't stop thinking, what if there was a better way? So I started building. The first version of the platform was awkward, slow, unstable, but it worked. Barely. It connected sellers and buyers directly. No middlemen. No price inflation. Just needs and solutions. I convinced a few vendors to test it. Told them it was just for practice. They had no idea I stayed up nights patching bugs and rewriting logic to keep their stores running. I didn't tell my family. Not out of spite, but out of instinct. I knew what they'd say. They'd smile with tight lips and call it cute. They'd ask who would pay my bills while I played tech girl. And worse, they'd use my ambition as proof I didn't understand my place. So I kept quiet. Let the results speak louder than the questions ever could. There were nights I wanted to quit. Nights I lay on a borrowed mattress. Tears soaking the pillow, wondering if I was wasting years on something no one would ever care about. But then I'd get a message, like the one from a man in a rural town who said, "Your app helped me sell my entire harvest. I finally paid off my truck." That message became my anchor. The growth came slow, one referral at a time. One user who told a cousin, who told a neighbor. I tracked metrics by hand, redesigned interfaces on lunch breaks. I automated systems I barely understood, learning as I went. No investors, no press, just progress. Then someone tweeted about it, just a single line. "This tool helped my dad sell out in 2 days. Who built this?" The numbers jumped. Downloads multiplied. I got emails from people I had never met, asking if I offered training, if I needed help, if I was hiring. Still, I didn't attach my name. Not yet. I let the platform speak for me, because I wasn't ready to see my name next to something they might mock. I didn't want the celebration if it had to come from the same mouths that once said I had nothing worth listening to. But now, hearing the CEO name me aloud, seeing every face in that ballroom turn, I realized something. They never saw it, because they never looked, and I never needed their permission to keep building. While they dismissed me, I was learning how supply chains fail. While they rolled their eyes, I was designing systems under pseudonyms. While they closed their doors, I was creating new ones. Brick by digital brick. Quiet, intentional, unshakable. And now that it stood tall, they had to walk through mine. She stepped up to the mic again, and something in the air changed. The kind of shift that doesn't need volume to be felt. The forks paused. The room leaned forward. And I sat there, trying to steady the shaking in my hands under the table. I wasn't ready for what she was about to say. I'd prepared myself for a nod, a passing mention, maybe a compliment veiled behind anonymous genius, or a young mind doing big things. But this was direct, personal, and it felt like the spotlight I never asked for had finally found me. "I want to tell you how I found her," the CEO said, calm and certain. "Not through a pitch deck. Not through a business card, through a quiet link sent by someone I trust. A single sentence, 'You need to see this.' Her words weren't dramatic, but they sank deep. I opened it out of curiosity. No branding, no flashy videos, just a tool. And in 2 weeks, it solved a problem we've spent years throwing money at. I asked who built it. He shrugged. "Some girl," he said. "She works alone, keeps her head down. Doesn't care about credit." I felt every pair of eyes shift. Some turned subtly, others without shame. My aunt stiffened. My cousins stopped chewing. I kept my eyes down, afraid that if I looked up too soon, I'd unravel. I was intrigued, she continued, so I dug deeper. The back end of the platform was brilliant. Every solution was simple, but surgical. The logic, clean, intentional. And then I found the name. She paused, just long enough for the silence to expand. "Emily." A few heads turned fully now, some with curiosity, some with confusion. My chest tightened. My breath was shallow. And in that moment, all I could think was, They're going to know." I was stunned, she said. Not because of her age or background, but because she was invisible. No LinkedIn fanfare, no press requests, no trail of breadcrumbs begging for recognition. Just excellence. Quiet, consistent, relentless excellence. I swallowed hard, blinked away the heat behind my eyes. Not here. Not now. Not for them. She didn't ask to be seen, the CEO said, softening her tone. But what she built made it impossible not to. That sentence landed in my chest like a warm weight, heavy but affirming, like something inside me had just clicked into place. After years of being overlooked, I wasn't being praised for surviving. I was being acknowledged for creating. I glanced at my aunt. Her smile was frozen hollow. My cousin looked like someone had just flipped his world upside down. My uncle was already reaching for his glass of water like his throat had dried up. The CEO's voice turned quiet, almost like she was letting the rest of the room listen in on a secret. She reminded me why I started in this business. She reminded me that the best work often lives in silence before the world catches up to it. And then she looked straight at me. No theatrics, no pointing call, just direct, unwavering recognition. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about a platform anymore. It was about the person behind it, me. And just like that, I wasn't the overlooked cousin. I wasn't the girl who showed up to family parties with nothing but a smile and a store-brand gift bag. I was the one they were now watching, studying, trying to recalibrate around. The CEO returned to her seat, no mic drop. No curtain call, just grace. But the moment hung there, thick and undeniable. People whispered. Someone raised a glass toward me in quiet tribute. A man in a tailored suit nodded slowly, eyes thoughtful. For the first time in that family's orbit, I wasn't Emily, the girl who makes do. I was Emily, the woman who built something worth following. And I didn't smile. Not yet. Because this wasn't joy. It was justice. It wasn't pride. It was clarity. And sometimes that's the loudest feeling of all. She didn't wait until dessert. The CEO stood, walked calmly toward my table, and extended her hand. Not as a gesture of favor, but of partnership. A handshake that felt less like recognition and more like an invitation to rewrite everything. "I'd like to schedule a meeting," she said. "Formal partnership. Equity stake. Advisory seat if you want it." My fingers curled around hers, steady. The room around us blurred. And for the first time in my life, my name wasn't just being spoken, it was being honored. Not reluctantly, not apologetically, but with intent. I heard the clink of a glass behind me. "That's amazing, Emily," my uncle said, too quickly, too loud. "You always had potential. We just didn't know you were working on something so big." His voice cracked on we, as if years of dismissal could be washed away with surprise and volume. My aunt leaned in next. "You should have told us, sweetheart. We would have helped, connected you to people. We know folks in distribution, you know." She smiled like we were in on some warm family joke. Like the years she spent cutting me out of group photos or asking me to take them instead had simply evaporated. I nodded politely, didn't flinch, didn't correct, just let the silence fill the space where their sincerity should have been. Then came my cousin, smirking like this was a game he suddenly wanted in on. "So, are you hiring?" I turned to him slowly. He wore the same cologne from when we were kids. The same smirk he used to wear when he'd say I didn't fit the family vibe. The same look he had when he asked if I could serve drinks instead of sitting at the grown-up table. But I didn't say any of that. I just smiled, small, unreadable. "You interested in tech?" I asked softly. He hesitated. "Well, I'm good with ideas. Branding. You know, I could help elevate the look. Give it edge." I looked down at the logo he hadn't recognized, the one he'd scrolled past 100 times without knowing whose work it was. And I realized something. They weren't celebrating me. They were repositioning themselves. It wasn't pride in my success. It was fear of being left out of it. My uncle cleared his throat again. Maybe we can all talk sometime. Sit down as a family. Map out how to grow this thing. He said it like it was theirs now. Like the years they spent pretending I didn't exist were just preamble. Like my sweat, my tears, my isolation. All of it was now open for negotiation because I had finally become convenient. But I had no intention of going backward. Not even for nostalgia. Thank you, I said, voice even. That means a lot. And it did. Just not for the reason they thought. Their reaction confirmed everything. The pity. The side eyes. The missed calls. It wasn't about who I was. It was about who I refused to become. They didn't ignore me because I was invisible. They ignored me because I didn't play the part they wrote for me. Now the script was mine. I turned back to the CEO. We were already planning next steps, product integration, expansion pilots, team scaling. My name would go on the next set of documents. And this time not in fine print. When the event ended, I walked out without waiting for photos. My cousin called after me, "Em, wait up!" But his voice dissolved into the noise of valet tickets and departing heels. I didn't stop, because this wasn't the end of something. This was the start of my terms. They booked me for the closing keynote. International Summit. Spotlight. Seats filled with CEOs, investors, and people I used to think lived on another planet. The kind that never looked down to see who they'd stepped over. But I was there now. Not by accident. Not by favor. By merit. I stood backstage, holding the clicker in my hand, heart thudding in my chest like it had its own story to tell. Somewhere in the front row, someone whispered, "She's the one, right? From the partnership with Meridian." I am. And when they called my name, I stepped out, not with a practiced smile or media polish, but with a quiet power that came from surviving what no one saw. "My name is Emily," I began, voice steady. "And I built something that no one believed in because no one believed in me." You could feel the silence thicken, like the room had stopped breathing for a second. I didn't have a team. I had insomnia and internet access. I didn't have mentors. I had message boards and $12 courses. And I didn't have applause. I had silence. Lots of it. The slides behind me weren't flashy. Just clean metrics, user stories before and afters. What I showed wasn't polish. It was proof. But what I really wanted them to hear was why I kept building when it felt like no one would ever see. Some people build for status. I built for survival. Because every time I was excluded, I learned to create a space where others like me wouldn't be. That's when the screen behind me shifted. Photos. Not of me, but of kids, teens, women from shelters, young men in second chance programs, smiling in front of laptops, logging in, launching. Because after the first check came in, real money, not just validation, I started building again. Not a company this time. A bridge. I launched the Second Start Fund. Quietly. Just a line on our site. No big campaign. Just an open door with a sign that said, "If they didn't see you, I do." We funded their Wi-Fi, paid for their laptops, covered their certifications, mentored without the corporate buzzwords. Because I remembered what it was like to sit in the dark, trying to teach myself HTML while my family watched TV in the other room. And I swore if I ever made it, I wouldn't forget how lonely it felt to learn by necessity. After the applause, after the interviews, I stood by the coffee table where a young girl waited. She had a name badge that read Observer. Her hands were shaking. She said, "I didn't think people like me were allowed up there." I smiled. "They don't let us up," I said. "We build our own steps." She cried. I almost did too, because that was the real reward. Not the contracts, not the magazine spreads or panels, but this echo of pain turned into possibility. This reminder that when we choose to heal out loud, we give others a blueprint to begin. I still lived quietly, still preferred coffee shops over conference rooms, still replied to customer emails myself at 2 a.m. sometimes. Not because I had to, but because I remembered when those were the only moments I felt seen. And every time I wrote a check to a girl whose uncle said she wasn't good enough, I smiled. Every time a boy coded his way out of the foster system, I breathed deeper, because if the world once turned its back on me, I had turned that into something permanent. A door, with no lock, and my name etched into the frame, not for glory, but for the ones still looking for the light. They called it a celebration dinner. Gold trim on the invitations, soft jazz in the background, and my name printed on the menu. It was the first time they'd ever written it right. I walked in alone. No assistant, no entourage, just a dress I liked and a calm I'd earned. The room had been decorated like a Pinterest dream. Flowers, candles, wine glasses sparkling under overhead lights. But nothing disguised what it really was. A late apology dressed as a tribute. My aunt met me at the door, arms already open like we were starring in a reunion special. "You look stunning, sweetheart," she cooed. "We're all just so proud. We always knew you had something special in you." I tilted my head. "Is that what you said when I wasn't invited to Christmas? Or was it when you told the neighbors I dropped out of everything I started?" Her smile froze mid-sentence, then defrosted into a laugh. "Oh, come on. That was years ago. We were all just worried. You know how families talk." Yes, I knew exactly how they talked, especially when they thought I wasn't listening. Photos were being taken across the room. I spotted my cousin fixing his collar in the mirrored wall and checking if the photographer was nearby. He caught my eye, winked. I didn't wink back. At dinner, they made a toast. My name, again, floated into the air, like confetti they hoped would distract from the broken glass beneath. "She's the embodiment of perseverance," my uncle said, raising his glass, "and a reminder that talent runs deep in this family." I almost choked on my water. Talent, maybe. Support? Not a drop. The speeches kept coming. One from a neighbor who claimed to have seen it in her since she was a child. One from a cousin who once said I couldn't market a lemonade stand. Each word added to the pile of glittering fiction they'd built overnight. But I smiled, nodded, let them have their show, because I already had mine. What they didn't know was that days before I'd finalized the creation of a new advisory council for my company, a group that would help steer strategy, mentor new talent, and shape long-term vision. I had the power to choose every seat, and I did. One by one, I filled the slots with names that meant something, mentors who answered emails when no one else did, friends who showed up when I had nothing, and even strangers who believed after one conversation. Not one family member made the list. Not even the ones now clinking glasses and posing with my photo in the background. After dessert, my cousin approached with his mother. "We were talking," she began, "and we just think it would be such a great idea if your uncle got involved. He's great with numbers." My cousin chimed in, "And I could help with outreach. You've got the heart, let us bring the edge." I looked at them, really looked. Not with bitterness, not with vengeance, but with clarity. I had spent so long trying to be accepted by them. Now, I didn't need to be. "My board is full," I said, voice gentle, "but thank you for the offer." They blinked, as if the sentence hadn't registered. "We could advise informally, of course," his mom added, a little too quickly. "Just family to family." I stood, smiled, tilted my head the same way my aunt used to when dismissing me. "That's kind, really, but I'm not building this from family anymore. I'm building it from truth." The conversation ended there, but the shift? It echoed louder than any toast that night, because for the first time, they weren't rewriting my story. They were reading it. From the outside, I parked a few blocks away. Not because I had to. My name would have gotten me a spot right at the front gate. But something about walking those last few steps felt necessary. The neighborhood hadn't changed much. Same cracked sidewalks, same iron gates that squeaked. Even the old mural on the corner, faded now, still smiled through layers of graffiti and rain. I stood across the street from the house where it all began. 2 stories of memory and silence. The windows still had the old lace curtains. The porch still sagged a little on the left side. I wondered if they still whispered about me inside. She was always different. Quiet. Too quiet. Always chasing something. I used to think that was a flaw, that if I could just shrink a little more, I'd finally fit into whatever shape they needed me to be. But you can't fold a blueprint. You build it. And I had. Across the street, a little boy zipped by on a scooter. His backpack bounced against his back. For a split second, I saw myself. Not how they saw me, but how I actually was. Hungry. Curious. Waiting for someone to say go. No one ever did. So I went anyway. The speech from the summit had gone viral. Every major outlet ran the clip. Not because it was polished, but because it was honest. I never said their names. Never exposed the years of silence or the phrases that carved scars just under the skin. But I didn't have to. The world connected the dots. People sent messages. Your story is mine. I thought I was the only one. I needed this. And just like that, the girl they tried to keep quiet had become a megaphone. I stared at the house, took a breath. They tried to hide me, I whispered, and now they have to see me on the news. Not out of spite, out of justice, because when someone's been made invisible for too long, the moment they're finally seen, it burns. It doesn't scream. It doesn't shout. It glows. I turned to leave. A neighbor across the street called out, "You're her, right? The one they're all talking about." I smiled. Depends who you ask. But deep down I knew. For years they used to ask, who even is she? Now the world answers for me. And I never have to explain myself again.